You've been told that love is weakness, that needing people is a liability, that the man who controls without attachment, who moves without sentiment, who builds his kingdom on fear and strategy rather than connection, that man is the one who wins. Machiavelli built an entire philosophy on that foundation, and it sounds convincing, until it doesn't. Picture a manager, sharp, calculated, respected in the boardroom. He'd read the books, applied the principles, never showed vulnerability, never let anyone get too close, kept his team at the precise distance where they were useful but never indispensable to him emotionally. He thought that was strength. Then the company hit a crisis, restructuring, uncertainty everywhere. And one by one, quietly, without drama, his team started mentally checking out. Not because they were disloyal, because they had never actually been loyal, not to him. They were loyal to their paychecks, their positions, their own survival, exactly as Machiavelli would have predicted, except he forgot one thing. Across the hall was another manager, different kind of leader. She remembered birthdays. She asked about sick parents and struggling kids. She stayed late not to monitor, but to help. When the crisis hit her team, something completely different happened. They stayed. They fought for her. They covered her gaps without being asked, not out of strategy, out of love. Her team didn't just survive the restructuring, they became the reason the company survived it. And the Machiavellian manager sat in his corner office watching it happen, completely unable to explain it with any framework he owned, because what she had built wasn't in the manual. Now consider a different story. A man in his late 40s, successful by every external measure. He'd spent 2 decades being strategically guarded, kept friendships functional, never deep, gave enough to maintain relationships, but never enough to feel exposed. Then he got seriously ill, and he waited for his circle to show up. They didn't. Not the colleagues he'd networked with at every right event, not the contacts he'd carefully maintained. The one person who appeared at his door, unasked, uninvited, with food and time and presence, was a friend he'd nearly written off years ago for being too emotional, too needy, too much. The very thing Machiavelli would have cut from the circle immediately. If this is hitting something real in you, subscribe. Content that actually challenges the cold strategy gospel instead of just packaging it differently gets buried by algorithms that reward comfortable certainty. Your subscription pushes back against that. Here's what those 2 stories expose that no Machiavellian framework will ever account for. Love is not a sentiment, it is a structural force. It builds things that fear and strategy cannot. It survives conditions that calculated loyalty collapses under, and the philosophy that treats it as weakness has a catastrophic blind spot buried at its foundation. Machiavelli's entire architecture rests on one assumption, that people are primarily driven by self-interest, that fear outlasts affection, that a prince who is loved is dependent on others, and dependency is vulnerability. It sounds like hard truth. It reads like wisdom, but it is a half-truth dressed in the language of clarity, and half-truths are the most dangerous lies. Here's what the philosophy gets completely wrong, and why it matters more than any single tactical lesson Machiavelli ever wrote. Fear-based loyalty has an expiration date. Not a long one, not a hidden one, a structural one, built into the foundation of the arrangement from the very beginning. The moment your power weakens, the moment the threat dissolves, the moment you can no longer enforce consequences with the same credibility, that loyalty evaporates. Not gradually, not reluctantly, instantly, completely, without warning and without apology. Every person you controlled through calculation rather than connection walks away the moment the calculus changes. And here is the truth that the Machiavellian framework never adequately answers. The calculus always changes. Power shifts, circumstances shift. The leverage you held today becomes irrelevant tomorrow. And when it does, you will discover with brutal precision exactly what fear-based loyalty was always worth: nothing that lasts. Love-based loyalty has a completely different architecture, and understanding that difference is not a soft observation, it is a structural analysis. It doesn't depend on your power remaining intact. It doesn't require continuous enforcement or the maintenance of threat. It doesn't need the consequences to stay credible because it was never built on consequences to begin with, which means it cannot be ended by changing the transaction. The manager's team didn't stay during the crisis because they calculated that staying served their self-interest. They stayed because they genuinely did not want her to fail. That is a force that Machiavellian strategy has no mechanism to produce and no framework to explain. You cannot engineer it. You cannot manufacture it through calculated warmth deployed at strategic intervals. It either exists because something real was built between people, or it doesn't exist at all. And the man who spent his career maintaining calculated distances discovers this not as a theory, but as a lived, irreversible reality at the exact moment he needs it most. Here's what they never tell you about the Machiavellian gospel, the context that gets quietly omitted every time someone packages his philosophy as a blueprint for modern dominance. The Prince was written by a man in exile, not by a ruler on a throne, not by a strategist at the height of his influence, by Niccolò Machiavelli, stripped of his position, removed from the corridors of Florentine power he had served for years, tortured under suspicion of conspiracy, and then released into a forced retirement that he experienced as a kind of living death. He wrote The Prince desperately, partially as an audition piece, hoping to prove his usefulness to the Medici family that had just destroyed his career. That is the origin of the cold gospel of power. Not triumph, desperation, not a throne, exile. That context is never mentioned in the motivational repacking of his ideas. It should be the very first thing said every single time. A man who had built genuine loyalty rather than enforced compliance might not have been exiled at all. Or if the political tide had turned regardless, because political tides turn regardless, he would not have been alone in it. The friendships built on real affection, the alliances rooted in genuine respect rather than calculated mutual utility, those tend to survive political seasons in ways that strategic arrangements never do. People protect the ones they love when the storm arrives. They quietly disappear from the ones they merely served. Machiavelli had spent his career navigating power through strategy and calculation, and when the system he navigated turned against him, there was no one whose loyalty to him as a person ran deeper than their loyalty to their own position. His masterwork on power was written by a man who had lost everything and everyone. That is not an advertisement for his method. Read carefully. That is the most honest warning about it that exists. Here's where the philosophy does its deepest and most invisible damage. It doesn't just change your strategy, it rewires your perception at a level that operates below conscious choice. When you adopt the Machiavellian framework completely, when you begin treating every relationship as a resource to be managed, every person as either an asset or a liability on your internal ledger, every emotional connection as a potential vulnerability to be monitored and minimized, you don't just become more strategic, you become less capable of receiving what you actually need, because you've trained your mind to look for the angle in everything, to scan every act of warmth for the hidden transaction, to interpret genuine care as either naivety or manipulation. And slowly, without any single dramatic moment of transformation, you lose the ability to let people in, even when they are offering something completely real. The walls you built to protect your kingdom become the walls that make your kingdom unlivable.
Psychologists call this hyper-vigilant attachment, the state where the protective mechanisms built to prevent betrayal become so automatic, so deeply embedded in how you process human interaction, that they begin blocking genuine connection entirely. Not because connection stopped being available to you, not because the people around you stopped being capable of offering it, but because the mind has been trained through repeated reinforcement to classify vulnerability as threat, openness as exposure, and warmth as a variable to be assessed rather than a gift to be received. The Machiavellian man doesn't just choose not to love strategically. Over time, through the consistent application of his own framework, he slowly loses the psychological architecture for it. The capacity atrophies, the muscle weakens from disuse, and that loss is completely invisible to him until the moment of crisis arrives, until the room is empty, until the silence is total, and he realizes with a clarity that no philosophy can soften that he built a kingdom no one wanted to live in. Here's the line that breaks the entire framework open if you're willing to look at it directly. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. That conditional, if you cannot be both, contains the real confession buried inside the cold philosophy. He knew both was possible. He acknowledged it explicitly. He simply didn't believe it was achievable in practice, or perhaps more accurately, he didn't believe he himself could achieve it. And that belief, not the strategic observations, not the political analysis, but that foundational personal belief in the impossibility of being simultaneously strong and genuinely loved, that is where the entire system goes wrong at its root. Because that belief is not political wisdom, it is not hard truth forged in the fires of real power, it is a wound. It is the rationalization of a man who may never have fully experienced what it meant to be both formidable and deeply, genuinely cared for. And he built a philosophy on that wound and handed it to generations of men as though it were architecture. The leaders who endure, not just in history books, but in the actual memory of the people who knew them, worked beside them, followed them into difficulty, are not the ones who chose fear over love. They are the ones who refused the choice entirely, who understood that genuine strength does not require the elimination of warmth to remain credible, that a man can be completely unwilling to be manipulated and still be deeply, authentically loved, that composure and genuine care are not opposites pulling against each other, but complementary forces that, when held together, create something that neither produces alone. The Machiavellian framework presents you with a binary, fear or love, strategy or sentiment, power or connection. And that binary is the lie at the center of everything. Because the people who could not be rattled, could not be bought, could not be broken, and who were simultaneously the kind of people others would walk through fire for, those are not two different categories of person. Historically, consistently, they are the same person. The framework that told you to choose never understood that the choice was false. So, if you've been building your life on Machiavellian foundations, maintaining calculated distances, treating vulnerability as enemy territory, measuring every relationship by what it produces rather than what it means, keeping your genuine self behind walls you tell yourself are strength, know this: the punishment for that approach is not immediate. It does not arrive as a single dramatic consequence you can point to and learn from. It is delayed, accumulative, and quiet. It comes in the form of a room that should be full and isn't, in the form of loyalty that performs beautifully under normal conditions and dissolves completely the moment the conditions change, in the form of a life that reads as powerful from the outside, the titles, the positioning, the carefully maintained image of untouchable composure, and echoes on the inside with a silence that no amount of strategic success ever fills. The Machiavellian man often doesn't realize what he's lost until the accounting is already complete, until the season where he discovers that all the power he accumulated never translated into the one thing power was supposed to buy him: peace in the presence of people who actually know him. The philosophy that told you love destroys power got it exactly, catastrophically,
backwards. Love is not the enemy of lasting power. It is the only foundation on which lasting power has ever actually been built. Not the performance of warmth deployed at calculated intervals to manage perception, not strategic affection used as a tool of influence, but the real thing, chosen freely, costly in its vulnerability, and completely incompatible with any system that reduces people to their utility. The manager across the hall didn't build her team's loyalty by being strategic about warmth. She built it by being genuinely present, genuinely invested, genuinely human in the moments when it would have been easier and safer to maintain professional distance. And when the crisis arrived, that realness was the only currency that mattered. Your capacity for genuine love, for the people in your life, for the work you do, for the values you refuse to compromise, is not a weakness hiding inside your strength. It is the strength. It is the part of you that no external force can calculate away, no shift in power can make irrelevant, and no season of adversity can strip from you unless you hand it over willingly. Don't let a manual written in exile by a man who lost everything convince you to build your life like a fortress no one is welcome in. The most powerful thing you will ever do is remain completely, unapologetically, strategically human. That is what Machiavelli's entire philosophy could never survive, and neither can anyone who tries to use it against you.